Yeah. If you want, I can use this as seat cover for you.
Oh, that would be lovely. Save me from looking like I...
Microphones don't like me, they give me lots of feedback. Everybody. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for coming to Little Soul's Journey Home, Truth and Reconciliation event. I'm going to introduce Ray St. Denis, who's the Executive Director for Shining Mountains, to get us started.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming on this less than sunny afternoon. It is not what we had planned for. It's not what the weatherman said we were going to have. He lied. So to start us all in a right way, in a good way, I would like to ask our elder, Terry Lynn Munn, to open us in a good way.
Go.
So welcome everyone. I'm so excited to be able to look around and see. You can sit down. I'm sitting down. It's all good. Yeah, thank you though. Thank you for the show of respect. I feel respected with you sitting down, so we're all good. What's really thrilling to me, I was actually on the founding board of the Aboriginal Healing Foundation, and we traveled around. In 1998, there was 5,000 survivors. I'm a survivor from St. Mary's in Kenora, Ontario. There were 5,000 survivors together telling their story for the first time. And the heaviness there was something that was unbelievably hard, and people didn't understand and nobody knew. But we've come a long way to be able to look around and see people from all nations that have joined us to stand with us, to understand. And so in my work in the Aboriginal Healing Foundation, we actually negotiated and debated about that word, reconciliation. Because actually the word reconciliation means to go back to the relationship we used to have. Hold on, that's not where we want to go. So what I like to say is that we're really working towards right relation. And when we talk about right relation, there's a mutual respect. But it's also, remember the other part of the truth and reconciliation. So I say truth and right relation, because the truth is what our relationship has to be based on. And so we come from a lot of, and a lot of people that have come to me and said, yeah, but Carrie, that was a long time ago. And yeah, it's devastatingly hard to listen to the reports of finding the graves of the unmarked children and things. That's terribly sad for all of us. But it was a long time ago. And I need to tell you a truth. And I say this from personal experience in my professional work and in my own experience in my family, that it's not over. That the stigma, that the assumptions, that the policies, they still seize babies in the hospital. If you're on reserve and you have a baby, your chances of having your baby apprehended at birth, especially in the north, are very high, without cause or apparent cause. So we've got a lot of work to do. But I hope today that, I think, if you've never heard about the intergenerational impact Google it, because I'm not going to go into that today. But I hope today, instead of everything you've learned and everything you've seen, what my prayer is today is that you don't listen with your head ears, with your mind ears. That today, all of us, including us survivors and families of survivors that have been affected in all our communities, can we listen today with our heart ears? That's where the transformation, that's where the relationships build. And it actually goes from one, we have, we reconcile or we come into right relation person by person. So we each have to reach out. So I'm going to say a prayer to bless this time together. I know that we don't all believe in the same way. We don't follow the same pathway. So I encourage you, pray in the way that is comfortable to you. Creator God, we thank you for today. We thank you for the miracle of grace and the fact that we can stand together, seeking that right relationship together and wanting to learn truths and to acknowledge the past, but to move forward together. We ask that your hand would be upon us, that you would bless this time together. Amen. Hi, hi. Turn it off.
Technology is not my friend. So we have a number of dignitaries with us today, and first up, I would like to invite Earl Dreeshen, MP, Red Deer Mountain View. Earl was born in Red Deer, Alberta, and is well respected in business circles in the city and in area towns and villages. Earl and his wife Judy are fourth-generation farmers who own and operate a family farm near Pine Lake, Alberta. They have 2 grown children, Megan and Devin. Earl holds a Bachelor's of Education degree from the University of Alberta and taught math at the Innisfil High School for 34 years, retiring in June 2008. Earl was elected Member of Parliament for the Red Deer constituency in 2008, 2011, 15, and 19, and re-elected in October 21. He has served as a Canadian delegate for the Parle Americas and has served as a member of the Standing Committees on Health, Public Accounts, Ethics, Aboriginal Affairs, Trade, Agriculture and Industry, Science and Technology. Earl presently sits and is Vice Chair of the Environment and Sustainable Development Committee. Welcome, Earl.
Well, thank you very much, and I really do appreciate the words that we have heard earlier today. I've been very fortunate as a teacher to have had a chance to work with some wonderful Aboriginal children over the years, and my teaching actually came about because of some of those relationships that I had, and so therefore, when I became a political person, when I speak, I get lots of feedback too. Lots of different ways. But it was really important for me to be part of our Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development community, and that was something where I had a chance to visit with more Aboriginal communities and Aboriginal leaders, and it was during that time when the Truth and Reconciliation meetings were taking place. And I was honored to be at many of those ceremonies, and especially in the north. And it was great to see the way in which the community started the healing process. And that process is continuing. It's a long process, but it is also something that we have seen, particularly from the elders, that are saying, this has to stop. We have to make the differences because our children are our future as well. And knowing the strong traditions that they had had for millennia, it's important that they're able to make things right for themselves. So I thank you so much for this opportunity to be here today. I wish you all the best, and I know that this journey is best when we are all together, and I thank you so much.
Next up, we would like to welcome Blaine Calkins, MP for Red Deer Lacomb. Blaine is the Member of Parliament for the Federal Constituency of Red Deer Lacomb and one of the Conservative Party of Canada's longest-serving MPs. Prior to the 2015 federal election, Blaine was the Member of Parliament for the constituency of Wetaskiwin. He currently serves as the chair of the Conservation, Hunting and Angling Caucus and is passionate about constituents. He represents his province and his country. Blaine has been married to his wife Barbara for 24 years, and together they have 3 children. Blaine and his family reside in Lacomb, not far from the family farm where he was raised. In his spare time, he likes to escape to the outdoors for camping and fishing as much as possible. Welcome, Blaine.
Thank you, Tammy. I have some prepared notes here, but as I'm sitting here and listening to what other people have said, I wanted to just reflect a little bit on my experience. Together, Earl and I don't know if I should say this, Earl, have been members of Parliament for over 30 years, representing the fine people here in Central Alberta. And as I'm reflecting on some of that time, something happened early on. I was first elected in 2006. And I remember the day well. It was June 11th, 2008. And that was the day where, for the first time in my short career at that particular point in time, where I'd seen the House of Commons turned into a committee of the whole, and people who weren't elected or weren't appointed as judges or weren't appointed as senators come onto the floor of the House of Commons. They were Aboriginal leaders from across our country as the Government of Canada apologized officially for the black stain in our history known as residential schools. And, you know, over a career of, this is my 17th year in Parliament, there are several moments that are quite poignant. But little did I know then, even though I knew I was witnessing something that was going to change, fundamentally change relationships and how we do things in this country. I didn't know just how important and how impactful that change was going to be, because that actually started the conversation in this country for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which one of our fellow Albertans, Willie Littlechild, was a member of that, former member of Parliament for the riding of Wetaskiwin, prior to me becoming a member of Parliament. But hasn't the conversation changed for the better? Is there still work to do? Absolutely, there's still work to do. Generations of damage will require generations of healing and fixing the relationship, but it's started. And the momentum is growing. I don't think there's been a time in my life where the relationships between Canadians, at least First Nations, Aboriginal Canadians, and the rest of Canada has ever been better. And the reality is, as Canadians, as somebody who's not Aboriginal, we need that relationship to be healed. We need that relationship to be strong, because when we're cooperating and working together, we all mutually benefit from that relationship. And we have so much more to do and so much more to learn. And I'm just taking comfort as each and every day, as First Nations communities and as the Government of Canada and our provincial governments, our municipal governments, which is the one here in the city, the beautiful city of Red Deer, our mayor is right there. Commemorating a day like today, or on a day like today, is just one more step in making that relationship better. And for me, that's what reconciliation, it's not retribution, it's not restitution, it's going to be some of those kinds of things. People will have those feelings, and I understand that. But it's reconnecting, and it's going forward in a positive way, in a meaningful way where everybody's at the table being part of the conversation about where we go from here. And I think that's the true spirit of reconciliation, is having people at the table. And we will need We will need those conversations as our country continues to grow and as the world continues to look to Canada. Right now, there are dangers and threats out there, and there are opportunities for us, all of us as Canadians, to help our fellow human beings across this globe. And we will need those partnerships. We will need those relationships to be strong. We will need that trust and that respect going forward. And I think there's never been a better time in the history of the relationship in modern days at least. And I sincerely wish that as we stop today and pause and think about those children who haven't come home. Think about, as a parent, it's just astounding to me that you can send your child to school not knowing that you're not going to see them again. That's an unfathomable concept to me, and yet it is a reality for far too many people that are still here. It's an unfathomable concept for most of us. So as we stop and reflect, and as we think about that past, and we think about how to make things better in the future, let's continue to keep talking, to keep loving each other, respecting each other, and healing. And I know the future is going to continue to just get better and better. Thank you for having me here today.
All people. I'm not short. I am vertically challenged. So it is my deepest pleasure to introduce my friend, my colleague, my Vice President of the Métis Nation of Alberta. Dan Cardinal has been our Vice President since, I believe, 2014, yes. And we're so grateful to have him. He is a champion for Métis people. He taught our languages in Cree and Michif, both in schools and in universities. And so I have made this a little shorter, but it is my pleasure to have Dan Cardinal.
Thank you. First and foremost, I would like to acknowledge that we are on treaty territory of 6 and 7, and also the homeland for the Métis. And I would like to acknowledge our elder, Carrie Lynn Locke, my elder, my friend, for the opening prayer and always starting us in a good way. Thank you. Kinanashkum. Truth and reconciliation. Truth is the past. Reconciliation is fixing something, doing something about it. It's being sincere. Canadians learn and recognize and reflect upon the history and ongoing legacy of residential schools, the trauma experienced by many, and the hope for a healthy future. The day emphasizes the ongoing need for reconciliation, building, strengthening relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. September 30th is also Orange Shirt Day, a day when Canadians wear orange to recognize the ongoing intergenerational effects of residential schools and to acknowledge that every child matters. The orange shirt symbolizes the stripping away of culture, self-esteem, and freedom from Indigenous children over generations. So I say to you, learn the truth about the past through events, books, movies, and other resources, and reach out to elders or knowledge keepers now and throughout the year. And today I will say to you in my language, Anushkagi sigat ni naas kumono keni foyan, kiawao kapik swate, kawitamate, Kanske mespek kajaks, det gick till match. Magen i vieken, Peter se wispek ewa, kiano, kahkio, utakani povia kiwa utano. Kahkio is mantuegio sigwe. And what I said is, the last part, we are all God's children, and we are all related. Mercy, hi, nananashkamon.
As the elder here, I get to be bossy. It's starting to rain, so if there's anybody with little ones, if you'd like to come and be under our little tent here, please bring the little ones in. We don't want them to get wet. And if there's anyone, if small ones are here by themselves, then you can come and sit here. We've got a few empty seats here, but please don't be out. That includes you. Bring him in out of the rain.
So I'm bringing words from our Métis Local 492 president. He was unable to be with us today due to circumstances in his life. For today, the National Day of Reconciliation, Little Souls, welcome home. Greetings from Métis Local 492, President Joe Trzeski. Good day, everyone, and thank you for coming together to remember these sad days in Aboriginal and Canadian history. These sad days in our history need never be forgotten. The stories must be told in every learning institute in Canada, and the world for that matter. We owe that much to all the lost children and survivors that their stories never be forgotten. Once again, on behalf of Métis Local 492, thank you all for being here today. Enjoy the rest of the day. And he did not realize it was going to be raining cats and dogs either. And next, although he doesn't need a lot of introduction, I would like to invite up Mayor Johnson. Mayor Johnson has always been an active part of the community, spending time volunteering in several organizations in Red Deer and Central Alberta, including the Rotary Club, United Way, Red Deer Royals, Friends of the Hospital Foundation, and the Red Deer District Chamber of Commerce. Mayor Ken was awarded the Queen's Jubilee Medal in 2012 and is a dynamic and dedicated leader. Before serving his first term as councillor in 2013, Ken had a 40-year career with Scotiabank. He enjoys music, fishing, gardening, and spending time with family and friends. Mayor Johnson.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. And tell me, where does the weather go today? My goodness, we have a month of sunshine, and all of a sudden here we are. If there's any other kids, there's plenty of room on City Hall steps. There's a real good covering there. Or anybody else up there, please do that. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to City Hall Park. And it's my privilege as mayor, of course, on behalf of our city citizens, to welcome you here on such a fantastic day. I'm joined by Councillor Bruce Baruma. He's sitting over here. Councillor Baruma, welcome. And many members of our administration are through here. And certainly I would really like to express my thanks and gratitude to Elder Carey today. Thank you so much. And her message, listen with the heart. And the heart is what we have in common.
and the soul is what we have in common. When we look across the great spectrum of who we are, sometimes we get lost on our visible or physical attributes, and it's our souls and our hearts that really matter. And so, Elder Carey, thank you for reminding us of that today. I know there's one or two communications people out in the audience today, and they always get nervous when I don't stick to the script. So I'm going to try to stick to the script today and deliver. Elder Carey says don't do that, but I think I should today for sure. And I see a couple of them over there with the big smiles on them this morning. So I will say this, Elder Carey, thank you for saying the words right relationship. Truth and right relationship. I think that makes just a tremendous amount of sense. So through my work on City Council, indeed all of City Council, we've had the opportunity to learn with the local elders and our incredible community groups to understand the important relationship Indigenous peoples have to the lands we are on here today. It is on these traditional territories that we at the city work together to build a welcoming and inclusive community. In 2015, City Council passed a motion demonstrating our commitment to the implementation of those goals. And on June 21, members of Red Deer City Council and Red Deer Urban Aboriginal Voices Society signed a protocol agreement. And I recognize Elder Lyle here today as one of the people who have brought me along in this work. So thank you, Elder Lyle, for that. We continue to work with UAVS to define and determine and implement the goal that we are on. As you can see here, in 2019, 6 flags were raised at City Hall Park, including the federal, provincial, municipal, Treaty 6, 7, and Métis Nation flags. This was an acknowledgement of our past, present, and our future. I want to say in a very personal way today, and this is where Combs is getting nervous now because I'm folding up the paper. I read a proclamation yesterday commemorating today, September 30th, as TRC Day. One of the sobering clauses in that proclamation was our own residential school here in Red Deer, which had the highest mortality rate of any residential school or industrial school in the entire country. In the entire country. Very, very sobering. And I want to say, a few days ago, I kind of thought, what can the mayor say today that would linger with people or make a difference, or you could carry it in your hearts, as Elder Carey said. And I thought of the children themselves and why we are here to celebrate their souls and their journey home. And it's fitting, I think, the rain has started today so that we can look at a number of children today. And I would ask that you would look at the children today and the many other children who are with us today. And if you can imagine in your heart of hearts that only 4 out of 5 are going to come home, and that if there are 20 there will be 5 that won't come home. And if there are 100 there are only 80 that will come home. And 20 will not come home. And so, in that sorrow and in that hope, dwell upon the journey forward that we never, as a nation, ever as a nation, think that we can reach into the culture of a people, of a nation, and take away their generation. Let us never go there again, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, let us celebrate today. Let us learn today. Let us bind together in a spirit of right relationship and enjoy the time we have. Thank you very much.
herding wet cats with these guys. Finally, I would like to welcome Elder Lyle Keewaiten Richards, President of Remembering the Children's Society. Born in Edmonton to a Cree mother from the Okanaganese band in the Touchwood Isle Hills district in Saskatchewan, Lyle was scooped in Alberta in 1959 and adopted by a white United Church minister. Having to bridge the two cultures, his innate traits of being part of the land, earth, and nation have prompted him to retain his Indigenous identity. Lyle has a wide variety of volunteer experience since 1985, including race relations, music, housing, and historical reenactment. Lyle's life has been the long road home. After meeting his birth family in the 80s, Lyle spent much time learning from his Aboriginal elders. He's been awarded the Red Deer Aboriginal Turtle Award for Lifetime Achievement and the Mayor of Red Deer's Special Awards for Community Service twice. After his work with the Red Deer Indian Industrial School, Sunnybrook Church, and now President of Remembering the Children's Society, he was granted an honorary Doctorate of Sacred Letters from St. Stephen's College in Edmonton. Welcome, Elder Lyle.
These guys are a hard act to follow. Most of you have heard this story before, but I always tell it because I think it's so poignant that you know what happened. It was 1987, and Morris and I were working together at the Red Deer District Museum. And in walks this old man at coffee time. His name was Albert Lightning. And he says, "Oh, there you are. You're the one that's going to find my brother." I said, "Well, okay, where is your brother?" He says, "Well, he died in 1919 at the Red Deer Indian Industrial School, and we don't know where they put him." And so, okay, well, I'll see what I can do. And of course, Morris says, "Yeah, go ahead, you're a summer student, you really don't have a job description, so carry on." And so I go mucking about, and then I go up to the cemetery, and here's this old dusty dome that has names and drawings and whatnot on it. And sure enough, there's Richard Lightning. And then in that grave, there's three more kids. I always forget that, but anyway, there's three more. There's a mass grave. And what happened is that they had Spanish flu, so they were all buried together. And then at the same time, the owner of the property where the cemetery was tried to donate some headboards. It was a little bit too soon. We couldn't accept them, but it alerted us at that point where the cemetery was. And then Michael Daw gave me a list of names, 208 names of children that went to that school. And so I started putting all the math together, and I said, "Holy smoke!" Well, I started off looking for one, and I ended up finding them all. And so here's 70 kids that we've come up with now that didn't go home from that school. They were, some of them tried to go home, some of them died of consumption, of TB. There was, this school was just one of the worst places in Canada. It was the worst place in Canada. And the thing was, they knew it. There was a guy that came out there, a doctor, and he was studying on these schools. And he said, "Look, these are terrible places." Dr. Rice. Anyway, and he said, "Well, you know, we can't do that." And actually, the guy that was in charge of it, Scott, I think. Anyway, he said 50% die. That's good enough, because it's better that 50% of them go home and be productive members of society. That was the attitude we were dealing with. And so today, we don't need to go to all those places because there's so much hurt, there's so much trauma, there's so much things that what we need to do is acknowledge that that's there. And say that we don't have to pick that up. You know, we don't have to say, "God, I heard it, and I'm going to come up here and plead for you and tell you the story of my mom," and so on and so forth. But we can suffice to say that each and every one of us has a story that has some kind of tragedy, in it. So what do? So they gave me a doctorate in sacred letters. Actually, it wasn't just me. There was a fellow named Don Hepburn, and him and I worked together at Sunnybrook Church. And what we did is we sat around his kitchen table, and we poured over the old records from the school, And his wife tossed ideas of cookies and coffee over the Cornwall. And then they gave us a doctor that said, well, if that's what reconciliation is, sign me up. Because really, it's the conversation. It's the sitting down and having conversations and sort of saying, okay, how does and teasing out the details and saying, well, why is it that you guys are tax burdens? Well, we're not tax burdens, and you can tell that story. And or why is it that they're doing so much, along giving a day off to everybody, and I'm an employer, I got to pay for it. Well, I'll tell you why. And why is it that June 11th you guys go up to the cemetery and have a ceremony? Well, because it's important. It's important we recognize them young souls going home. It's important that we be here. And I want to thank you all for coming out today, because I think this is a really good start. Go out for coffee together. It's a good one.
Granddaughter stole my coat and brought it back. I have a secret to tell about Mr. Lyle. I don't think anybody else here knows. Lyle named my granddaughter Sarah Ray, except he named her Naomi Sedema from the green he had. So I'm incredibly grateful to him. Thanks, everyone. As we were talking about what we wanted to do moving forward with this day, we wanted to really talk about what truth and reconciliation meant. And so we did a little side project, and we held some sharing circles with local Indigenous community members to talk about truth and reconciliation. And when we started, we wanted to find out how residential schools experience affected and continues to affect our community. We heard some hard stories from survivors of abuse, disconnection, isolation, and pain. We heard from family members of survivors that it wasn't something that was talked about, but the effects were still felt by many. I'd like to thank Elder Maggie Loney for helping to facilitate those circles. We asked everyone the question, what does truth and reconciliation mean to you? And it became very clear that the truth of what really happened to Indigenous peoples is not common knowledge. That the government attempts to assimilate the Indians has not been communicated well. So let's start with a little background. The first Indian residential school opened in 1831 by the New England Company for Indigenous Boys. In 1834, it expanded to include Indigenous girls. By the 1880s, the Canadian federal government had adopted an official policy of funding residential schools across Canada run by churches. The explicit intent was to separate these children from their families and cultures. In 1884, the Bagot Commission of the United Province of Canada recommending training students in as many manual labor or industrial schools as possible. In such schools, isolated from the influence of their parents, students would impersonally acquire the manners, habits, and customs of civilized life. In 1879, the Davin Report recommended Indian residential schools based on the American model. Davin reported that the boarding school approach was the best answer because it took the Aboriginal child from the reserve and kept him in the constant circle of civilization, assured attendance, and removed him from the retarding influence of his parents. By 1931, 80 residential schools existed throughout Canada, requiring Indigenous children to participate in the public school system, as it was seen as an important instrument of the assimilation policy, and compulsory attendance was incorporated into the Indian Act in the early 20th century. Keep in mind that all of these measures were justified in part by officials as being designed to help Aboriginal people and move them forward. The approach was, We are from the government and we're here to help. In the grand scheme of things, Indigenous peoples were not further ahead when you consider prior to all that help, we were self-determining, self-reliant, and self-governing. The last residential school in Canada closed in 1996. It is estimated that over 150 First Nations, Métis, and Inuit children were forced from their homes and families to attend these institutions, and that only around 80,000 survived their experience. Indigenous children right across Canada share the common trauma of being dragged away from their homes and cast into strange places where they were beaten if they were caught speaking their own languages. Since the residential schools were denominational, Christian indoctrination was the main focus. Learning a trade became a poor second. Not surprisingly, children ran away from residential school in droves. So many escaped that the RCMP were used to chase them down and haul them back to classes. The problem of escaping children got to the point where the government passed a law stating that Indian parents had no authority over their children while in residential school. The situation would have been enough of a nightmare for parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and children alike, even if it had not been coupled by the fact that the non-Aboriginal people had built such substandard buildings into which to herd a captive generation of young Indians that many of the children became sick and died. And many deaths were never reported to the family. In 1914, Duncan Campbell Scott, formerly Deputy Superintendent General of Indian Affairs, confessed, "The system is open to criticism. Insufficient care was exercised in the admission of children to the schools. The well-known predisposition of Indians to tuberculosis resulted in a very large percentage of deaths among the pupils. They were housed in buildings not designed for school purposes, and these buildings became infected and dangerous to the inmates. It is quite within the mark to say that 50% of the children who passed through these schools did not live to benefit from the education which they received therein." The stories of these experiences is almost unbelievable. Children as young as 3 were removed from their families and communities and taken far away to be educated. Their hair shorn off, beaten for speaking their language, separated from their siblings, unable to practice their culture, given new Christian names, and worse. The Red Deer Industrial School opened in 1839 and is located 3 miles west of Red Deer on the opposite bank of the Red Deer River. It was the first Methodist residential school to operate in the area. While roughly the same size as similar institutions, it was unique in that it was located a significant difference from the Indigenous communities it was supposed to serve, with the nearest reserve being 65 kilometers away. This distance from Indigenous communities, in combination with the outbreak of Spanish flu and a subsequent outbreak of smallpox, led to the school's closure in 1919. 5 years later, the Methodists opened the Poundmaker Residential School in Edmonton, which was closer to its intended communities. There are many stories from our Indigenous seniors about their experiences. A local elder shared that the school in which she attended, she was not allowed to have any contact with her brother who was at the same school. Their only form of communication was to wave to each other across the yard, and if caught, they would be beaten. Discipline for not following the rules was things like being made wash floors on hands and knees in nightgowns, being locked in a closet, or worse yet, being locked in a room in a basement with no light and no heat, and sometimes for days on end. Both girls and boys were sexually assaulted by priests, teachers, and other residents at the schools. There was no comfort given to these children, who were scared, confused, and stripped of everything they knew. Another elder speaks of how her room was above the back door of the school, and she would see them taking bodies out at night. No one spoke of this. She told no one, because no one would believe her. She knew what she saw, and to this day, she still experiences survivor guilt. It's not uncommon for our families of residential school survivors to say mom and or dad didn't talk about what they experienced at residential school, but they still feel the effects. Many survivors turn to substances to numb the pain or to help them try to forget. Language and culture has been lost as it was not being able to be passed down to the next generations through our oral traditions. Traditional ways of knowing and being have been lost, never to return, as those that held some of these teachings and languages have also been lost. For those brave enough to keep they kept their traditions going in secret, or moved deep into the bush to keep their children safe from those that deemed they were trying to help. When we talk about truth and reconciliation, we have to speak and acknowledge the truth of what happened to these families and children. It was called assimilation, but was really an act of genocide. Genocide of culture, genocide of language, genocide of community. The death of innocent children, because once the colonists settled into their agricultural communities, the Indigenous peoples were no longer of use to the government and set out to eradicate the Indian problem. Canadian history has been taught and written from a settler perspective. Indigenous peoples know that it is incomplete and inaccurate depiction of the reality of Canada's history. Children raised in a loving and supportive environment will most likely become loving and supportive adults and parents. Unfortunately, for the majority of the survivors of residential schools, they were not raised in such an environment and therefore were likely without the skills to provide that to their children. A lot of the social ills, such as alcoholism, violence, verbal and sexual abuse, and suicide found in Indigenous communities have their roots firmly placed in the dark halls of the residential school system. But I want to leave you with this. We are resilient. In spite of all of the atrocities committed against our people, we remain. We are strong. We are coming back. We are embracing our cultural ways, restoring our languages as much as possible, and we will continue to carry on. We will continue to make life better for the next 7 generations. I leave you with a final thought from one of our elders. I have chosen to forgive, not to absolve anyone, but to take the hate from my heart, so I can live. I choose to live my life where my experiences at residential school do not define me by breaking me down, but have made me stronger. Thank you.
About it. I need the help of a few people. Shannon, Joseph, Sharon, Chase.
I can't move from here.
These people are part of my immediate family. And it's because of them that I thought about the idea of a blanket. Because in families that I'm a part of, Métis families, First Nation families, we made blankets for our children. Well, children in those residential institutions didn't get blankets made for them, whether they survived or not. And so I thought, what better way to recognize those children and to honor them and to recognize the loss in our communities than to create a community blanket. And I was asked who made the blanket. That was a really hard thing to answer because the answer is a lot of people. So for those of our people that are in the community, if you participated by making a square, by helping sew the squares together, by binding the squares, the sheet of squares to it, the backing, or by binding them, would you please come forward and help me present our blanket?
While that is happening, the 3 generation singers are going to provide some song.
That was going to happen. Miss, you're right in my shot.
There are names on some of these. Kelly Arnold. Hazel. Children from the schools.
Sorry, I made your way. We're in the cameraman's way.
It's okay.
We just wanted to see the blanket.
Yeah. No. I'm trying to make sure I get this.
You should be up here holding. Come and do your job.
Well, there's something that's the same between all cultures.
I don't know of another community blanket for children that has been made for our little souls. This is for those who didn't come home. For those who did. And it's for their parents that never got the chance to
Thank you. No, you're the only person who didn't. Thank you.
I'm short, but not that short. Just that. Carrie Lynn Lund is a residential school survivor, among many other things. Carrie Lynn is a Métis consultant whose primary focus is helping Indigenous communities and organizations to identify and address health and social issues that have a negative impact on their families and children. She's done extensive work in the area of health research, particularly with Indigenous peoples, resilience, and research ethics. Her work includes service on the Aboriginal Healing Foundation, the Canadian Institute of Health Research Ethics Standing Committee, and the Health Canada Public Health Agency of Canada Research Ethics Committee, the board. Carolyn contributes substantially to the Canadian Institute of Health Research, the review and process development, and is highly skilled within Native network environment. She has been on staff with the Communities, Alliances and Network, formerly known as the Canadian Aboriginal AIDS Network, CAN, since 2013, and is currently a coordinating national community-led implementation project, Drummond Sachs. She is also my friend and my mentor.
So that's just all the head stuff. Who I really am is I am a grandmother of 3 beautiful granddaughters, twin granddaughters, one that serves in the armed forces, the other one who stayed behind to be with her grandmother, her Lacomb, because somebody needs to look after her. And I wasn't going to argue. I have 5 daughters. 1 lives with God and 4 live with us. And I am married to an amazing man who has been a blessing. So I am a member of Gift Lake Métis settlement in north of Edmonton by about 4.5 hours. Depends if you're a Gift Laker, it's 4 hours. If you're driving the speed limit, it's 4.5. So. I 4.5, I swear, 4.5.
We're not on traffic, it's okay.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I have had the privilege of working with over 220 First Nations and Indigenous communities in my life. I went to residential school at the age of 4. 2 RCMP officers showed up and they said they were taking me to school, and I had already been through 4 very abusive foster homes. I was given up at birth. I actually was born in prison, which makes me like a young offender, I think, because I lived there for 10 months. So I got lots, I can go to jails and we kind of, hang out together, and I go, well, hey, I got you. I was a young offender, so. It's one of those conversation starters, and it's good. But I went to residential school, and I remember the trip just like it was yesterday. Part of the healing path was just going backwards and remembering, and then unpacking, and then putting it aside. And so I remember there was a man and a woman that took me to the school, and they told me it was a nice school and that I was going to be happy there. And I want to say that I, in looking back, believe that that's what they believe. I don't know how many of you know that in the Museum of Man in Ottawa, there still is on record a letter that was written by the first Minister of Indian Affairs, Campbell Duncan Scott, and that letter was written to the police and to the schools, and especially to the schools, and the letter said it would be unkind to expect the Indian children to do more than grade 2 because they simply haven't got the mind for it. So better training them for trades. That's what we should do. Well, I got a number of degrees, so either I, got injected with some brains here or something, but we all know that today is not to be true. We have many highly educated Indigenous people, but at the time, think about it. Your government is telling you this. You've got orders to follow. You have things to account for. And I want to acknowledge Ray for this one. I'm a residential school. I thought I'd heard it all, and I thought that I had understood it all, but Ray brought something to me. And she said, I wonder what it was like for the people that actually had to take the children and take them away. I wonder what it was like. I wonder how they felt about that. They didn't know what was going to happen. But what about now? What about now looking and hearing all of this and understanding that you played a critical part in what that was, in taking those children away? And I know that some were taken by force. I remember that Billy Ehrlich Chief Billy Joseph, myself and Billy Ehrlich, and sat actually with Stephen Harper, Prime Minister at the time, and we helped him to write the letter of apology. And I remember that Billy Ehrlich was saying that when he was tiny, his grandfather grabbed him. There was 2 planes that came, and his grandfather grabbed him and hid him. But when they came back, there was not one child left in that community, and they had been taken by force by the police and social work. But Ray said to me, I wonder how they feel now, knowing that they had a part in that. And so she said, do you think that this is something that, we could speak about? And I gotta tell you, not everybody is at the same place of our healing journey. I was a Métis, so I didn't get a room I was not allowed to stay. When we got there, I was dragged up the stairs, led through the building. I actually shaved my head and bug stuff on it, and I'm 4 years old. And my place was, they took me out the back into the root cellar, and there was a little horsehair mat, and that's where my bed was. They locked me in at night, and they let me out in the morning, and I couldn't go to school because I wasn't paid by the federal government. So my job, they gave me a little bucket and a scrub brush, and my job was to scrub the floors up and down the hallway. And one person that was there took, for some reason, pleasure in tormenting me. And as I would just finish that, and I had already figured out that if I did a really good job, maybe I wouldn't get slapped every time they went by me. But she would kick the bucket and say, do it again, half-breed. And that's where the seeds of rage were planted. And so those seeds of rage still have embers, and in some still have fire. And when you walk down the street and you see someone that's struggling with addictions, or you see somebody that is in the inner cities, please remember that seed of rage is still in there and was passed down through the generations, the hurt and the harm. Please don't assume that this lifestyle is by choice. It's a result of the intergenerational impact, and that the drugs and the alcohol are medicine of choice to try and block out the pain. But I got to tell you that I am blessed because of my faith, because of the people I have around me, because of the stories, because of the prayers, that I'm at a place where I can receive what you were saying, Ray, and I can consider the harms to other people and the burden that other people. So today, we want to acknowledge the RCMP. We want to acknowledge that they were given orders to be a part of the apprehension. And we want to acknowledge that there was and there is the possibility that there is a heaviness and guilt and hurt that is a result of that. And as an elder, I want to say that for me personally, that I appreciate the service that you do. I appreciate the many times that I have called and you have responded to situations. I want to say that today, I walk in right relation, and I encourage all of us to walk in right relation. That let us not make assumptions of the integrity and the intention and the way that we think you're thinking. Let us assume that this is a time when you want to, as brothers and sisters, walk in right relation with us. And so we want to make a presentation to celebrate this day. And Ray, Dan, please make the presentation. And please accept. All right. And I just want to say that, going forward, my heartfelt desire is that when you're talking in the locker rooms, when you're out on patrol, when you're meetings and discussions, that you carry this word of walking in right relation, not making assumptions, and that we as Indigenous peoples do the same for you, that we don't assume the worst, and that we walk in right relations too. Hi.
Thank you very much, Elder Terry. Very much honored. On behalf of Superintendent Glassford, we accept this with great honor, and as we work forward, we do acknowledge that everybody's at a different place in their journey, and we're working towards that. We're taking those small steps, and as long as we try and do that, we understand the stories, we hear the stories, and we move forward, and that is what we're committed to. So thank you very much, and know that we hear you, and our doors are open, and we will keep that relationship going.
So if you would be so kind to look at that. Like the blanket, it has meaning. The circles represent the community of Red Deer. The teepee in it represents all of the dwelling spaces for the people in Red Deer, whether they be under a bridge or a big mansion. And the dream catcher at the bottom represents the hopes and dreams that everybody has. And so, I've got to tell you guys, I'm a Johnny Cash fan, and he put out this awesome song, and one verse of it sticks in my head all the time. In 500 years of dying, not a single Indian's turned white. And that's the truth.
As they said, they're not on traffic, so you're good.
Yeah, before things wrap up, I just want to say that some of the words that were shared today may trigger or may make you sad, or we don't want anybody going away from here that is in distress. I'm here. We have other people that are elders here that if you want to come and talk, but if you have somebody of your own, please don't carry anything. It doesn't help you and it doesn't help anybody else. And this is not just to Indigenous people. You're not Indigenous, you can carry your own things too. So we're here to talk and to sit, and I don't have coffee, but you know.